Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a really specific look into the procedural heart of the U.S. patent system.
A deep one, for sure.
Yeah, we're jumping into MPP Chapter 2300. This is the rule book for when things get contentious, specifically about who invented what.
Right, we're talking about derivation proceedings.
Exactly. Those situations where one party basically says, hey, that other person stole my invention.
And this is where the system gets complicated because you have the normal administrative job of the USPTO, the examination colliding with its, judicial function.
A collision's a good word for it.
You have these overlapping applications both trying to claim the same thing, and the whole process has to accommodate both the examiner and the judges on the board.
And that collision point is our focus. We're going to dissect MPP Section 2311, which is titled Consult a Technology Center Practice Specialist.
It sounds dry, but it's so important.
It really is. It's a mandatory checkpoint. It's the rule designed to manage that high-stakes handoff when a derivation dispute gets real, and it basically keeps the examiners from getting ahead of the judges. Okay, so let's start with that transfer of power. An examiner's just doing their job, reviewing claims, and then boom, a formal derivation petition gets accepted by the PT day.
The Patent Trial and Appeal Board.
Right. What happens in that instant? How does the power shift away from that examiner?
Well, the shift is, it's absolute. The moment the PT TABE initiates a contested case, which a derivation is, it immediately gets jurisdiction over the entire file.
So it's like the PT day just reaches in and takes the folder off the examiner's desk.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And that means the examiner's ability to act on their own is just gone.
Gone completely.
MPT 2307 is very clear. Once the board has jurisdiction, the examiner is prohibited from taking any further action on that file.
So they can't issue a rejection, they can't issue an allowance.
Nothing. Unless the board specifically tells them to do something, the examiner goes from being the main decision maker to more of an administrator just holding the place.
And that makes perfect sense now why you'd need Section 2311. Without that kind of firewall, you could have an examiner, find a claim allowable and issue a notice of allowance.
Right. While the PT is trying to figure out who actually invented the thing in the first place, it would be a procedural nightmare.
So what's the biggest risk here? What's the thing they're trying to prevent?
The biggest risk is definitely the premature grant of a patent. I mean, think about it. If an examiner allows an application and it becomes a patent,
okay,
and then the PT rules that the inventor was actually the other person.
Oh, wow.
Now the PTAB has to figure out how to undo a legally issued patent. It's so much harder than just stopping an application from moving forward. This checkpoint protects the whole process.
And this is totally different from normal prosecution, right? Like
Yeah.
if I file a regular petition about something, that usually just goes to the tech center director.
Exactly. That's an administrative issue. This is a fundamental legal question of inventorship. Who invented this is a question for the board, not for the examiner's boss.
So it's administrative management versus judicial oversight.
That's it, precisely. It requires the highest level of scrutiny.
Okay, so that brings us to the core action in 2311. The rule kicks in when an examiner finds allowable subject matter in either of the applications.
The petitioners or the respondents, yeah.
At that point, they have to hit the brakes and call this specialist. So who is this person, the Technology Center Practice Specialist, and what do they actually do?
The TCPS, as they're called, is basically the procedural conscience of the system.
I like that, a procedural conscience.
Yeah. They're not there to weigh in on whether the invention is novel or obvious. Their only job is to make sure the examiner's next step follows the very complex rules for these contested cases.
I notice the MPEP sometimes talks about the TCPS and an interference practice specialist, or IPS. Are they the same thing?
Ah, that's a good catch. It's a bit of a historical artifact, but it's important context. Derivation proceedings are relatively new. They came from the America Invents Act.
The AIA.
Right. Before that, these kinds of disputes were called interferences, and the specialist for those was the IPS. The USPTO basically built the new derivation rules on top of the old interference framework.
So whether it's an IPS or a TCPS, the job is the same.
The function is identical. Provide expert procedural guidance so the examiner doesn't accidentally step on the PTB's toes.
So the examiner finds a claim that on any other Tuesday they would allow. But today, because of this derivation proceeding, they have to stop and call the TCPS.
They do, and the specialist then guides them on how to maintain the procedural hold on the application. It's not just about pausing, it's often about applying a very specific kind of rejection.
And this is a strict rule.
Very strict. It even applies to what are called benefit files, any related applications that claim priority back to the one in the dispute. The examiner might be able to keep working on those, but they still have to consult the specialist before taking any major action.
That sets us up perfectly for the technical problem here. The whole reason we're in this mess is because the claims are patentably indistinct.
They're basically for the same invention.
Right. So if the claims look allowable, the specialist tells the examiner to use a specific legal tool to lock them down. What is that tool? How does it work as a placeholder?
The tool they have to use is a rejection under 35 U.S.C. Section 102A2.
Okay.
Under the AIA, this is one of the main statutes for rejecting a claim based on prior art, specifically a U.S. patent application that was filed earlier by someone else.
Wait, hold on. This seems paradoxical. Let's say inventor A claims inventor B stole their idea.
Oh.
So A is the alleged victim. But you're saying the examiner uses inventor B's application, the alleged thief's application, to reject inventor A's claims. That feels like you're punishing the wrong person.
It sounds completely counterintuitive, I know. But from a procedural standpoint, it's actually brilliant.
Explain that.
The rejection has nothing to do with guilt or innocence. It's all about timing and keeping the status quo. Inventor B's application has the earlier filing date.
All right.
So the statute says that the earlier filed application is prior art against the later one. The technical trigger is that the inventions are indistinct and the filing dates are different. The examiner is just applying the rule based on the dates on the papers in front of them.
So the 1 or 2 rejection is just the TCPS's way of telling the examiner, put this on the record, we're officially saying these claims are unpatentable for now because of this other earlier document.
That's exactly it.
And we're going to leave it that way until the PTB sorts out who really deserves that earlier date.
Precisely. The examiner isn't judging the derivation. They're just using the required statutory tool to freeze the application in an unpatentable state. It locks everything down so neither application can accidentally get granted, while the real fight is happening over at the board.
And that rejection has to stay in place. That's a crucial detail for anyone prosecuting one of these cases.
And that gets us to the whole purpose of MPEP 2311. It's all about safeguarding the process. It's about preventing a premature decision.
Protecting the PTB's role as the specialized court here.
Exactly. The rule prevents the examiner from making a finding that could contradict what the PTAB eventually decides. It's all about administrative consistency.
You need that coordination for due process. I mean, you can't have one part of the USPTO looking at novelty while another part is deciding on originality. The system would just fall apart.
It would. But the system does provide a way out for the applicant, or at least a way to formally state their case, which really shows the dance between examination and adjudication.
Okay, what's this escape latch?
The applicant who got the rejection inventor A in our example can try to overcome it by filing a showing under 37 CFR 1.130A.
And what does that do?
That's the formal way for the applicant to argue that the subject matter in the earlier application, the one being used to reject their claims, was actually derived from them.
So that's where the allegation officially enters the prosecution record.
Yep.
The applicant basically says, yes, that application is earlier, but they got the idea from me, so you can't use it as prior art against me.
Exactly. And that showing, that formal proof of derivation, is precisely what Chapter 2300 and the PTAB exist to adjudicate. So Section 2311 is the traffic cop that makes it all happen.
So it tells the examiner to apply the rejection.
Which then forces the applicant to formally raise the derivation issue.
Which then sends the whole dispute squarely to the PTAB's desk, right where it belongs.
Perfect summary.
So this whole section is really just the formal handshake between the examiners and the judges, with the TCPS acting as the mediator to make sure nothing gets dropped.
It really is. It highlights how important procedural precision is. And, we've spent this whole time talking about the examiner's duty to consult an expert, the TCPS, to get things right internally.
Right.
But maybe a final thought for you, for the listener, is to compare that to the applicant's duty.
What's the connection?
Well, think about it. How does the office's internal duty to consult an expert compare to the applicant's own continuous non-negotiable duty to disclose all material information to the examiner?
Oh, that's a great parallel. The duty of disclosure.
Right. That includes information from other related, commonly owned applications.
So the examiner has to check with the TCPS to make sure they don't undermine the PTT. And at the same time, the applicant has this external duty to give the examiner all the facts so the examiner isn't working in the dark.
Precisely. That duty of disclosure exists whether there's a derivation challenge or not. It just shows that the entire system is built on this foundation of precision and expertise, with responsibilities on both sides of the table. Everyone has to play by the rules.
A very thought-provoking way to end it. Discipline and expertise are demanded from everyone.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for guiding us through the very high-stakes world of MPP 2311.
My pleasure. And we also want to give a special thank you to Mike Shepard, our creative director, who organized this whole series to make the MPP structured and accessible for everyone.
Absolutely. And as always, for any authoritative guidance on these topics, please consult the official MPP and a registered patent practitioner. That's all for this deep dive. We'll talk to you next time.